We're here to talk about Storybook Workshop. Storybook Workshop is fascinating. If you want to call it a video game, it's one of those things that I wouldn't blame if you're like, this isn't a video game, Ben. But we are here talking about something that's on the Wii and is very fascinating. It is basically a compilation of, kind of public domain stories, right? However, A is just something that's made by Konami, and then B, it also has microphone support. And so what that microphone support does in this game is it does things like change your voice and also like records voiceover and things like that. So I was really curious, exactly how they would utilize something like this. And as, a game built by Konami, also the question I wanted to know was like, when you are having a company like Konami essentially build a compilation of children's book stories and adding layers of presentation to it, what would you get out of that? And what I think what I got was like something I was actually incredibly pleased with, because it is this thing that has kind of a very it is very much like a Japanese game aesthetic to it, right? I hate to say it, but like cutesy Japanese art styles are always kind of my preferred thing. And you can basically choose between one of these 15 stories from all over the world and go ahead and read those. And the core idea here is to basically encourage families to kind of read together, right? Provide kids with incentives to read aloud. You can also utilize the game's kind of built-in narration just to listen to the stories. And they have this whole profile system, which is not uncommon on the Wii, where sometimes they'll have you can be mama, dada, or the son or something like that when you make characters and things like that. But this game, I think it takes it a little bit more literally, where when you create these family profiles, the kids get things like report cards and stickers, and it all has this very charming aesthetic behind it, where the report cards are not a grade of D to A. It's these little flowers that bloom, and the language is very much about this report card shows how different things these stories are teaching them in these games are blooming in their heart, right? This is the hope flower. This is the empathy flower and things like that, right? And so it's all presented as very cute things. So the intention is for you to have maybe 2 to 4 people reading a book at the same time. Guess what? I don't have any kids. I have a cat. My cat doesn't want to sit through this. So, I'm playing this a little, not necessarily in the way that people normally would, right? So, you basically use this microphone, and I was using this microphone to go through and read these stories, but I did kind of treat it like I was reading stories to kids, right? And I think, I don't know why, but we have this weird, blueprint that we kind of get built into our head about kind of people read kids' storybooks. So it's just oh, hello there, honey. Well, it's a fine day, isn't it? Kind of thing, right? It's kind of goofy that we read things that way. But despite, that feeling, the game kind of does a lot of different things to modify your voice automatically. Maybe that helps kids and things like that. When you talk to when you're reading the voice lines for a character that might be a frog that's a bad frog. He's not a nice frog. It'll be ribbit, ribbit. Oh, I'm gonna eat you up today, kind of thing, right? So it is a little voice changer in that kind of way, where all the girl characters, this very high pitched, oh no, you took my ring, kind of thing, right? So it's kind of this very cutesy little thing. And so, I think you just gotta kind of get into it, right? If you want to try yourself at some amateur voice acting, this is the game for you. But, along with this presentation, there's a lot of this really cute art. As you go through the stories, it kind of goes through these different phases. They do some cute ideas of you can technically peek to the next frame by using the Wii remote to grab and pull the picture and things like that. They seem a little aware that there should be these little fun gimmicky kind of things in there. It's not super all over the place, I will say. It's all pretty minimal. I think by the time you get the first couple times you peek back to the next page, it's not something that you necessarily keep doing long term, right? So these are very public access stories, right? On screen right now, there's Thumbelina, which is kind of a weird story. I think so. This is my first exposure to a lot of these stories, really, and I think I was not really aware of just what a lot of these stories were about. So it's an interesting interesting way to experience these as an adult, where I finally have a better understanding, which I think, it is kind of like, I think everybody's just like, oh, you cut the stomach open in the Little Red Riding Hood and fill the wolf with rocks. Like, that's kind of morbid, but I think everybody just talks about fairy tales in that way to some extent, right? So I don't want to sit there and be like, oh, it's just darker than I thought. I just think I didn't realize, I don't know if the depth is the right word, but there's a lot of stuff going on in these stories, which I kind of appreciate. And as an adult, I get to take a step back and look at it. And I think, I have grown to appreciate stories for kids way more. And there's probably about like 8 to 10 hours worth of stories here. It's all connected to this cute little interface. There's like a little mascot. I think his name's like Terebi or something like that. I don't remember if they give him a name in the English one, but I think his name's like Terebi in the Japanese one. And he's almost like a little TV dog kind of thing. And he walks around between the rooms and guides you around. But most of the stories themselves are just completely separated from little Telebi guy. But, after you get through them once, there's not a lot to kind of bring you back. But it really does seem to want you to reread books, which I will say, when you think about kids and things like that and how they consume media, they often do repeat viewings of media, right? They often reread things a lot. They want to see the same thing, which to some extent, I think adults do too. But I think with kids, it's a lot more prevalent there. So I don't know, maybe rereading all this stuff multiple times wouldn't really be a challenge for a kid if they were really into it. But I would say that, like, the third or fourth time I've read through Little Red Riding Hood on my own as an adult man, I'm like, all right, do I really do this anymore? But they do provide some like levels of incentives. Not only does the flower in your report card grow if you're playing as a kid, but also it does things like there's little changes in the background. So when you go through it, you will get like different little characters in the back. So like maybe there's a wolf in the background on one, and the next time there's a little grasshopper going, right? So nothing crazy there. That's really hard to notice generally. Probably the biggest thing is me support, because then not all of them. Specifically, it seems like the ones where characters die, you can't put your me in. But, they'll put your little me in there, so you can be, Thumbelina. You can be, in my case, Benalina. Or I forget what they say, Oculina, because I think my me's name is Oculian. Oculina, or something like that. Anyways, they don't voice that, obviously. But, so you get, like, me support, and it's kind of funny to see your little me, like, postage stamped all over the characters and things like that. And then also, when you get deep enough in these stories through re-ratings, they'll also start asking you questions like, how does this character feel, right? Like, does this character feel happy? Does this character feel sad? And things like that. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff. But, as an adult, rereading these things, I think those things didn't really add a lot of value. So I think it's one of those things that, like, if you are... I don't know the mindset of a kid and like how appealing that is. But what I can say as an adult is I think these are really great ways to kind of consume these stories. I mean, as somebody who has not read them really before, I think the presentation here is really good. It has a lot of very like cutesy Japanese aesthetic. I don't really know how to put it where like, I don't know if these artists that did this are like traditionally Konami artists, but I feel like a lot of the art does remind me of some of the more cutesy art styles that some of the Konami games can have. And as you go through, you can also do like sing-alongs, and they also have like some amateurish kid program kind of things as well. So I think just the presentation overall is just like really good. And the stories, even though they're very kids focused, I think they're very good stories for what they are on their own. The Happy Prince is maybe one of the saddest stories I have read in a really long time. Like, if you know, we've talked about it before, Panzer Dragoon Orta, Pandora's Box, the little child soldier story, when I talk about that story, I start tearing up. When I talk about the Happy Prince, I start tearing up. And I don't know how much of that is the story itself versus, the aesthetic, the music, and all these things that get kind of like wrapped into it through something like this. So if you are interested in these like very kids friendly kind of stories, I think as an adult, you can sit through it. And then, unless you really want to sit there and play around with it in a way more intended, I think just giving it a watch through once is just kind of like fun as is, right? But, with a kid or something like that, I do think these are at least fun ways to present them. I just don't know like how much your kid will keep attention, especially if they sit there and like press the A button through it. They kind of have this thing where it's like, we will record your voice and your kid can come back and listen to you read the story. And I don't know how appealing that is. Also, the microphone I have, the quality on it was really awful. I bought this microphone separately from the game, but it is still a Konami branded microphone for the Wii, so I think you do need this specific type of microphone, but I think it may have been associated with the game SingStar, and I don't know if the audio quality on these microphones are worse. Classic Game Room did a review of this game, and his audio sounded much better. So I think it might be you might want to look for the white version of this microphone with the red Konami logo. I don't know if that for real exists or not, but there's like a bundle version. I just bought the game loose or whatever. So anyways, I think it's just like a really fun way to present these things. I think just aesthetically, it's like really good. And yeah, I really liked it. I liked it a lot. So